Hey everybody, happy Monday. Just want to take a minute to wish everybody a happy Memorial Day. I think I would be remiss if I didn't put something out for a guy that's hosts an American themed and patriotic type podcast. If I didn't say something about the significance of today and what it means. I have a few notes here. I know everybody probably has a lot going on. I know we do, kind of chilling out in my outdoor space today. It's absolutely beautiful here in Ohio where we are. I think there's some rain to the south of us, so if you're in that belt of showers, I apologize. I hope that passes by pretty quick for you. But I hope everybody has a wonderful day. But I did want to draw your attention to some things and just remind everybody about the importance of Memorial Day. A case could be made that today, Memorial Day and everything it symbolizes, is more of a representation of our history and who we are as a people than arguably any other holiday. We've always kind of united around this idea and this mindset that we must stand in the face of tyranny, no matter what the cost, even if that is the cost of life. And that's kind of what we remember today on Memorial Day. And this goes back to the earliest times in our American history. I'm sure everybody is familiar with the Boston Massacre. Of course, I'm not sure what they're teaching in grade school these days, but that's one of the stories that we learned about in social studies and American history early. Probably somewhere around third grade. But if you're familiar with the Boston Massacre, the political temperature was pretty high in Boston around that time. This would have been March of 1770. There was a young man named Crispus Attucks. He was about 27 years old. He was a sailor and a dock worker. He was at the front of a pack of a few hundred protesters that decided one night to head down to the King's Custom House, where the king kept a lot of the money for the British Treasury. It was on King Street in Boston. And these protesters showed up. They were there to protest the enforcement of British tax law, and there were around 2,000 British soldiers that were occupying different houses in Boston around that time. They show up. There's one British soldier there guarding the custom house, and of course they all kind of gang up on him. He starts to fight back with his bayonet and musket, and nobody's hurt yet, but in his desperation he called for reinforcements, and more British soldiers showed up. And as barbs were traded back and forth, the protesters began to fight with sticks, throw rocks at these guys. They had clubs. Eventually, it was only a matter of time in the heat of the moment that a shot rang out, and one shot was fired. And when that happened, more British soldiers opened fire. And Crispus Attucks, a lot of people consider him to be the first casualty of the Revolutionary period. 2 musket balls tore through his chest, and that was the end of Crispus Attucks. But Crispus was doing something that I think has translated through time and displaying the American spirit that we're not going to put up with tyranny. We want to be a free people. We understand what that means, and if it costs us our life, so be it. A few years later, in 1775, now we're entering official American military operations. There was a man by the name of Isaac Davis who was elected to be a captain of a group of Minutemen in Acton, Massachusetts. Through a series of events that I won't go into here, his unit was chosen to lead the charge in the first battle of the American Revolution, the Battle of Concord. If you're familiar with that, I encourage you to look it up. It's a pretty interesting story. You can find maps of where all this stuff was located at the time. But Isaac Davis, his group led the charge on the Old North Bridge in Concord. And as they approached the bridge, British soldiers let go a very unorganized volley of shots. Some considered them to be warning shots. But one of those musket balls found Isaac Davis in his heart, and he was killed before he reached the Old North Bridge. And something interesting about Isaac Davis, a few hours before that at 7 o'clock in the morning, him and his Minutemen were at his house, and he turned back to his house to meet his wife and 4 children on the porch, and he told his wife, take care of the children. So not only do we have a bunch of great Americans that were willing to pay the ultimate sacrifice for our freedom, we forget oftentimes that many of them left children. They made widows. Their parents, they might have been the only child, and now their parents are left childless, all in the name of protecting this idea that we take for granted a lot of times, and that's the idea of freedom. Since that time, there's been an estimated 1.3 million people, 1,304,702 great American sailors, Marines, soldiers, airmen that have given their lives for the cause of freedom. This part of our history should be a sobering reminder that this American way of life is much more valuable than we give it credit for. These were men and women that were willing to pledge their lives, fortunes, and sacred honor and made that ultimate sacrifice. So we can enjoy days like today when it's nice out. The federal government has blessed us with a national holiday, so most of us don't have to work today. If you do, I hope you do get some time to enjoy time with your family and friends and reflect on what this day means. There's a lot of things that I'm perplexed because there's a lot of things that we know today. A lot of people can name the leading scorers in the NBA over the past 20 or 30 years. We know who all the celebrities and actors are. We know a lot of football coaches and major players. We just in April had the NFL draft, and there's a lot of names flying around that I'm sure most sports fans are familiar with. Politicians that are in the news, out of the news, we all know their names, and we think they're important, and sometimes they are. And now we've entered an area of social media where we have people with millions and millions of followers and interactions on their social media pages. And not to sound too insulting, but at the end of the day, a lot of them haven't done anything of value other than put their face in front of a camera. In spite of all that, there are 1.3 million people that did something more valuable than a lot of us can even fathom, no matter how hard we try today, that their names will never be known. Like I mentioned earlier, a lot of them left behind wives and children and brothers and sisters, aunts and uncles, family that will never see them. In an age where we're dedicating entire months to what I would consider victimhood, where we have all these specialized classes, and now we have African American History Month and Pride Month and all this stuff. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with those things, but we're giving whole months to these ideas, and we still just have one day to remember 1.3 million people that were willing to do something that a lot of us, if it came right down to it, would not be willing to do. I think the least we can do today is take some time to seriously reflect on what this day means and what that sacrifice means in our ability to enjoy days like today. I think it's a shame that there are a lot today. A lot of people have decided that America is evil. There's been calls for a new constitution, and some of these just outlandish things that I never thought I'd see in my lifetime that kind of, in my opinion, spits in the face of those 1.3 million people that paid the sacrifice so that they can have those type of conversations. But we really need to have some respect for where we came from, and a lot of that, I think, is reflected in today on Memorial Day. We don't have to agree on everything. We never will. That kind of goes without saying. But we don't have to agree on much of anything, really. But I think if we want to save this American spirit, we must unite around the principles that were worthy of the people's sacrifice and the blood that was spilled to make all this happen. Today there's nothing wrong with barbecues. Like I said, we've got some family coming over later, spend some time with friends, and that's all good. In fact, I believe that the men and women that gave their life for this country did so that we would have the freedom to enjoy these things. So that's fine. A lot of people kind of snub their nose at the barbecues and the cookouts and picnics and all that stuff, and I don't. Like I said, I think that's a good way to honor those people. But I do think it's important to find a little time today and spend some time in prayer and offer up thanks to God that He blessed us with such great men and women that were willing to pay that price so that we can do this today. If you're a family of a lost veteran, if you had a family member that was killed in action, and one of those 1.3 million people that were, in my opinion, the upper echelon of greatness in this country, today we mourn with you. We also rejoice with you in the legacy that they left, because in my opinion, there's no greater honor on a family than to say that they had somebody that was willing to lay their life on the line for the American way of freedom. So anyway, I don't want to take up too much of your time. This wasn't supposed to be a full episode. I just want to share some thoughts with you, give you, my opinion, a little bit of a special message on Memorial Day today. So have a great and happy Memorial Day. Be safe, enjoy the time with your family, and let these sacrifices that these men and women made remind us that America is still worth fighting for. At the end of the day, there's always something we can do, even if it's just take a little bit of time to remember where we came from, that can make America just a little bit more perfect. So take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and God bless.